Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Welcome back, because you were just here.
Yeah, that's
Is
right.
this what you were making fun of me for last week?
Yes, it just calls to mind this idea that people are just listening to the show on a constant feed, and are just like,
yeah, you got to fake it till you make it. I am your host, Chauncey Haworth, and this Negator is my sidekick, Sean.
Can that be my title now?
Negator? Just
yeah.
Negator? Yeah.
Yeah.
You look like Megatron, only you're all, what's up, guys?
Yeah, basically Marvin the robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did something terrible on the way here. I feel kind of bad about it.
Yeah. First hit and run's the hardest.
It is. It was close. You know, okay, so you know how when you're merging onto the freeway behind somebody who is slow?
Yes.
You really want to get past them. And the person behind you also really wants to get past you.
Right.
And so you merge onto the freeway, and then you go out to go around them, but this person behind you is already what my wife and I refer to as swooped you, and they swoop you and then come up along the side.
Okay, I can picture the situation.
So I was in mid-lane change when this guy swoops me. And he refuses to back off, and, I end up getting back into my lane because I'm going to die.
Right, yeah.
And then I did the thing that I feel kind of bad about.
Okay.
I flipped him the bird.
My goodness.
Well,
what in tarnation?
Well, I feel bad about
horrible.
this for two reasons. Because after I flipped him the bird, he didn't, flip me off back. And I could tell, he
burst into tears.
Yeah,
He
something
was
to
so
the effect of that.
affected.
He knew he had made a mistake. And I had taken it to this aggressive level. Was one reason why I felt bad about it. The other reason why I felt bad about it was that in this day and age, I feel it's a little irresponsible of me to do that with all the shadiness of people on the road. I'm just, I just got so upset that I potentially started some Wild West fight with this, I don't know.
If we've got any listeners in, L.A. or something, where flipping someone the bird while driving is just, waving.
Yeah, but that's where all the vehicle shootings are happening, aren't they?
Okay, that's a fair point that I didn't take into consideration when I said that. But, I don't think Reading is going to become a Mad Max wasteland.
This is Reading. Statistically, the likelihood of this guy, packing is, it's
quite
good.
high. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you're saying you were worried for your own safety. The guy might pull over.
I wasn't necessarily, worried for my own safety, but I did realize how...
You're contributing to a culture of violence and aggression on the road.
Yeah,
I'm trying to work this out here.
Yeah,
why this is a problem.
this is like a public group therapy. It's good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I felt like here's this guy who overreacted. I flipped him off.
Right.
And then I was overreacting, potentially leading to him or somebody else overreacting. And really the bottom line is, who cares?
It's a cycle of violence.
It is a cycle of violence, yeah. And really the bottom line is, who cares? I had plenty of time to get here.
Yeah.
So I don't see what I was so upset about.
Well, the thing is, if he so-called swooped you, and you were the one who backed off because of you were afraid you were going to die, then that means that he is superior to you in terms of masculinity.
I did feel a little emasculated by the situation, Felt pretty...
That's how I'm given to understand that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's correct.
I thought about following him and then tackling him and doing some sort of, touchdown dance over the top of him.
Right.
Just to...
See, that would reclaim your honor, and your ancestors would be proud.
It's interesting that reclaims your honor in American culture, That's, another, you kill them or you commit harry-carry or, something kind of extreme. But here you tackle them and do a football dance over the top.
Yeah.
But he wasn't driving a big old truck.
Okay.
So I wasn't that emasculated.
Yeah.
There wasn't some sort of I don't know how to put it on the radio when
Yeah.
they attach things that dangle from the backs of their trucks. There was none of that going on.
Oh, my God.
It was purely just a guy in some sort of green Subaru.
Sure.
So if you see a guy on the road in a green Subaru, man,
Kill him.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I really am sorry. I feel bad about it. I don't know what I was doing. It's like...
Right. Well, all jokes aside, I think a lot of times guys are very sensitive about status and that kind of thing. It's kind of weird to me, actually.
This is why I have a hard time fitting in with guys. I'll try to fit this in real quick. And so I'm young and I'm working at some sub shop, and this is before I had a beard, and my wife wanted me to trim my beard off. And I'm telling this guy at work, and he's all, what? You're going to do what your woman tells you to do, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just all like, well, we are married, and chances are she's the only person I'm ever going to be with again in my life, so I would just assume she'd find me somewhat attractive.
Right, yeah, seems wise, right?
Right, and it had nothing to do with, all I thought was, because, I am not a very manly guy, but I'm trapped in a body that looks pretty manly, I'm bearded, I wear I don't know what this is, cowboy flannel.
Right. Well, I mean, I can understand that.
But it's funny, I personally, in my mind, am not a very manly guy.
Right.
But,
yeah, well, you're preaching to the choir here, so.
All right. When we come back, we have ancient Incas.
Oh, yes.
That's a good topic. And the message for the takeaway before we go to commercial break is swooper no swoopin'. Come on back, Radio Wasteland. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Brien Foerster. Am I saying that correctly? I assume that I am, but you do have an interesting spelling of your first name.
Thank you.
Is it Brien?
That's right.
Yeah. So this is a topic that me personally, I'm really excited about, because I kind of feel with all this paranormal stuff that the one thing, the few collections of things that we're actually probably going to find absolute truth of is going to lie either in the ocean, microbial life on Mars, or it's going to have to do with ancient history being not exactly what we thought it was. And so I'm really excited about having you on to talk about this.
I'm excited too, actually.
Thank you.
So our opening question normally is, how did you get started in this? How did you go from almost Canada to the Incas?
I've always had a fascination with ancient mysteries and ancient enigmas and ancient cultures. And I started traveling when I was about 16 and have been to more than 90 countries. So I first decided to come to Peru about 13 years ago and was just blown away by the megalithic structures I saw and the fact that academics couldn't properly explain how they were made and who made them. So that is what began my journey here.
Yeah, another big question is why? I'm always hearing the question of how they were made, blah, 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 and everybody's arguing this, but it's ultimately, why? Why?
You don't ever wake up in the morning and be like, I want to build a pyramid.
Right. People are, and we're looking at generational efforts if they were done by man. So, why? Why would you struggle so hard to build something you might not ever see, So, the thing that's always really excited me about the Americas is that it seems like in the news every couple of years, mainstream science comes out and says that the Americas were colonized several thousand years earlier than we thought they were. And then a couple of years goes by and then they come out and say that again. And so it's really kind of amazing how far back it's creeping. So, can you give us a little background on that, on what you're thinking of the original colonization of South America?
Well, I find it very hard to believe that all of the people of North America, Central America, and South America crossed the Siberian land bridge in order to get here. It's a huge land mass if you combine all three Americas together. And so that's why you do find enigmatic structures that could not have been built, for example, by the Inca, because in some cases the megalithic structures would be incredibly difficult for us today to construct using electricity and modern power tools. So how could a Bronze Age culture have possibly done this high precision work? And the answer is they couldn't. We also find catastrophic damage at most of the locations, indicating that there was a cataclysmic event thousands upon thousands of years ago. So that's why I'm pursuing this.
And do we have any insight as to what that cataclysmic event might have been?
Yeah, I recently wrote a book called Aftershock that looked at a number of different theories, and all of the the four major theories that I've been able to look at have some good overlapping in that they state that there was a cataclysmic event that happened about 11,700 years ago, was global. It also corresponded with the end of the last ice age, which was incredibly rapid. It didn't take thousands of years to melt the ice. Robert Schoch, the geologist, believes that the world's oceans could have risen by more than 300 feet in 2 weeks.
Well, that is definitely not natural planet warming. And it seems to me like every time when we look back in history, all these things seem to coincide right at the end of the last ice age. And really, each time something coincides with it, I find it a little less coincidental. They're just all, society started at the last, civilization started at the end of the last ice age. But then all these other things happen, and it's just a little too coincidental.
Yeah, that's true. The conventional story is that the actual rise of actual civilizations, like Sumeria, the Indus Valley, Egypt, and China, happened maybe 6,000 years ago. But what seems to be happening, or what we're seeing, is that there was a global cataclysm about 12,000 years ago, and that caused a great die-off of plant life and humanity, etc. And then it took another 6,000 years for people to be able to coalesce again in major groups. So the so-called beginning of civilization that they talk about is the Renaissance, or the rebirth of humanity as a sophisticated societies, rather than the first time.
Yeah, so maybe for our listeners, you can explain to us the locations of the Inca as opposed to the Aztec and the Maya, because I think a lot of us maybe get confused on where they're at.
No, that's a good point. The Aztecs were basically in the area of present-day Mexico City and its environs. The Maya were more closer to the Gulf of Mexico, to the southeast, and then into Guatemala and Honduras. And then the Inca, at the height of their civilization, stretched from the middle of Chile and, basically Chile, and then up north through Bolivia and Peru and Ecuador and the southern part of Colombia. So there likely wasn't any interaction between the Inca and the Maya or the Aztec.
I see. And where do the Olmec fit into this?
The Olmecs are actually older than the Maya, and they also lived on the coastal area of the Gulf of Mexico.
I see. So what is the oldest Inca structure that we know of? And maybe you could give us mainstream science's view and now what we're starting to think.
Sure. Well, it's generally believed that the Inca developed in the area of Lake Titicaca, which half of it's in Peru, half of it's in Bolivia, probably somewhere around 100 AD. And then over the course of about 900 to 1,000 years, they established their civilization, became reasonably sophisticated culturally, and then they were driven out because of a climate change event that lasted 40 years, they were forced to move north, and that's when they found the city of Cusco, which became their capital in the highlands of Peru. And they existed there until they were basically destroyed by the Spanish around 1533 AD.
And so, how, why, well, I don't know. What is our guess at this point as to how they built these megaliths?
Well, they couldn't have built the megaliths because they were at the very best of Bronze Age culture. We see no improvement in their tool technology from 100 AD up until 1532. So there was no evolution in technology whatsoever. And all of the megalithic works are made out of incredibly hard stone like granite and basalt. And if you try to shape granite and basalt with a bronze chisel, it just makes the chisel bend. So
basically you shape bronze with granite, and not the other way around.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So what I believe and others believe is that the Inca found an abandoned megalithic city that had been destroyed in the distant past, and because they were blown away at the sophistication of the stone structures, they decided to make their capital city there.
I see. So there's a lot of thoughts behind who built them. There's a lot of angles of ancient aliens or ancient man. Are you leaning one way or the other on that?
Well, it was either a lost ancient civilization that somehow disappeared, or it had to be some kind of life from off planet because again, some of these structures would be very difficult to create in the 21st century. So if it's beyond our technology, and we supposedly are the highest level of technical civilization at this point throughout human history, then I think you have to entertain the idea that it could have been people or beings from another planet.
All right. Well, we are coming up on break. We got a lot more questions for you. You're listening to Brien Foerster here on Radio Wasteland. Come on back. All right. Welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Brien Foerster. We are talking about the Incas and ancient megaliths and basically the colonization of South America and how exactly that happened. So just to give people an idea, how big of stones are we talking when it comes to some of the larger megaliths?
Well, the larger ones in the Inca world are at a wall called Sacsayhuaman above Cusco, and some of those stones weigh 125 tons.
125 tons. So just to kind of put that into perspective, 125 tons is 101 ton pickups.
Right.
Basically.
125.
And what is the mainstream scientific view of how these were transported?
That they actually moved them on wooden rollers with ropes. And the problem is that there are no trees, or there were no trees in pre-Columbian the pre-Columbian area, or during the time of the Incas, that grow straight. The largest trees are basically bushes that grow with twists and turns in the trunk. And so they had no material, at least in terms of wood, to be able to be flat to create rollers out of. Also, it rains 6 months of the year in Cusco, so at least half of the time the weight of the stone itself would partially sink into the ground.
Yeah, that is amazing. So,
yeah, that's hard to get around.
It has always been hard for me to get around. Well, the way I like to look at it is that, by conservative estimate, we're about, as the human beings you look at today, we're about 200,000 years old. And society, civilization started about 6,000. Let's even make it easy for the math, it started about 10,000 years ago. And so if in that span we got to here, it's hard for me to believe in the previous 190,000 years nobody built a city.
I'm just playing with sticks and eating bananas, you know.
Yeah, and so I have been amazed by this ever since I was a little kid. So how old? So you gave us the conservative mainstream view of the cities, but how old do we think these cities would have to be for the Incas to have found them?
Well, I'm saying at least 12,000 because that's that's the time of the cataclysm. So unfortunately, we can't get a more specific date. I can tell you that we've had more than one geologist with us looking at these, and based on the weathering of the stone, they've stated clearly that the weathering itself is thousands or several thousand years old. And since the Inca only lived in that area for about 600 years, going back 1,000 years, the geologists confirmed that these structures have to be several times as old as the Inca civilization.
Well, even in that time frame, with us looking at the rest of the world for things, shouldn't we have found other examples of people being there prior?
Yeah, well, actually, that's why we travel to different parts of the world. We believe also that in Egypt, the Great Pyramid and some of the other structures there are also at least 12,000 years old, and were found by the Pharaonic people about 5,000 years ago. When you go to Turkey, you see incredible underground cities that were constructed, that were likely done thousands upon thousands of years ago. We have Baalbek in Lebanon, Petra in Jordan, and some other locations on the planet.
And so with these structures in South America, are we, a lot of what I read and see is that the stones on the bottom are obviously older, but drastically older than the stones on top. Are we seeing that in South America as well?
Yeah, definitely. Not only older, but larger. You find the largest stones are the foundation. So if you even go to a site like Machu Picchu, which is, of course, world famous, you'll see that about 10% of it is megalithic. And so that's another site that the Inca found, abandoned, and destroyed, and they rebuilt on top. And the contrast between the construction techniques are vastly different. The Inca work is small stones, roughly shaped, and glued together with basically a type of local clay, but the megalithic stones interlock with each other. Again, you're looking at stones weighing upwards of 40 plus tons.
Yeah, and in the case of Machu Picchu, on top of a hill.
Yeah, a mountain.
On top of a mountain, yeah. So it's safe to say that not only are these old, but they're potentially two cities old, back from when the Incas occupied them.
Yeah, we actually see two forms of ancient construction. So it's possible either two different high-tech civilizations were involved, or that they changed their techniques over time.
So when the Inca move in, do they view this as a gift from the gods? On some level, they obviously noticed that somebody had been there who was much more technically proficient than they were, and Cusco means the navel, as in the navel of their world. So I think they established Cusco as their capital because of the mind-blowing stonework they found there. So other than the difficulty of building these massive, massive stones, what other proof or leading clues do we have that's leading us to believe that these people did not build these things? There has to be some proof outside of that, maybe in their own lore and legends or something like that?
Well, unfortunately, the Catholic Church and the Spanish conquistadors tried their very best to wipe out all Inca knowledge. The Inca had a writing system called the quipu, which was a series of knotted cords, and so the Spanish and Catholic Church burnt them wherever they found them, trying to eradicate the history of the people. But if you spend time with local experts in Cusco, you do find out that there still is oral tradition talking about very advanced civilizations having lived there prior to the time of the Inca, and also the locations of the quarries, because each megalithic structure is always made of the same type of stone. They didn't mix different types of stone together. So in the case of one structure that is green granite, the quarry is about 2 miles away, but most of the work that was done was in basalt, and the basalt quarry is 45 miles away.
Yeah, that doesn't seem very practical unless you absolutely have a way that you know that you're going to move those things.
That's right.
Yeah. So, okay, so clearly, like, I have a hard time envisioning us handling a project of that magnitude today. I mean, I don't know, maybe we could, but that's it would be a lot of expense, and certainly. How advanced are we thinking that these ancient civilizations were exactly? And I know we don't know. I mean, we can't know, but
well, in the case of the Cusco area, the interesting thing is I recently had an engineer from Australia with me, and he believes that they were able to manipulate energy to such an extent that they were able to turn solid stone almost into plasticine. And that's why you get the complicated polygonal shapes, because they literally somehow, through energy, were able to make the stone moldable temporarily, and then it reset back into its solid form again. And that's way beyond our level of technology.
Yeah, I've seen some of this. It's like they made Play-Doh blocks and put them together. It's like they were melted into place in order to somewhat oblong shapes that still fit together perfectly. You know, does mainstream science have an argument for that?
Well, I don't think mainstream science does, but this particular engineer was thinking of outside of the box, and a lot of these stones have these protrusions, almost like knobs on them, and he believes that that's where the energy was actually injected into the stone. He thinks that the stone was roughly cut, and then a row of these large blocks would be put into place, roughly fitting, and then somehow they were able to energize, not necessarily heat the stone, but energize it and turn it into almost marshmallow material. Then once that row had set, then they would do the next section above it.
Well, it definitely has that marshmallow kind of look. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. We're going to commercial break. You're listening to Brien Foerster, and we're talking about the ancient Inca and how exactly did they do what they did. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Brien Foerster. We're talking about the ancient Incas. You know, there seems to be a big clash between archaeology and geology. And a lot of people researching ancient pasts seem to be going to geologists instead of archaeologists. And I'm assuming that's due to drastic pushback or just straight up ignoring them. Do you find that you get pushback when trying to get support or scientific backup?
Not as much anymore. I used to, but since I'm able to surround myself with archaeologists and stonemasons and engineers and people like that, then we're building up a very big collection of evidence and data. Archaeology, on some level, is not a hard science, it's a social science. And geology is science. Physics is science. So when you deal with actual scientists themselves, then that's when you get a more logical interpretation of things rather than suppositions.
Yeah, it kind of seemed like through the 90s, maybe the early 2000s, we were dealing with a hard-lined, absolutely not attitude out of mainstream science. But then, since then, it seems like scientists are a little more eyebrow-raised, maybe attitude. For me to notice it, the scientist that comes to mind is Michiro Kaku. You know, when you bring up strange things to him, he's always somewhat open-minded to the idea. There seems to have been a big change in science being open-minded to this. Do you think it has a lot to do with researchers like you getting hard science backing up what they're doing and kind of putting it in their face and saying, explain this?
Basically, I don't tend to push stuff into people's faces anymore. I just present the evidence.
That was my poetic way of saying it. I'm sure you're nice about it.
Sure, but you know, thankfully we have the internet, so you can automatically send information all around the planet. You don't need to go through something like peer review, which tends to be like a boy and girls club of people who have an agreement about what history was, and so that way, and of course, taking a multidisciplinary approach means that you're looking at any subject matter like this from many different angles.
Right. So they seem to be getting more open to it, and society is getting more open to it. What do you think it would take for science to say, yes, there's something to this, and it's textbook worthy, it's teaching worthy? What's it going to take for education to do that?
I think we have to look at the younger generations that are just starting to have a look at this. People who have had a 40-year career and believe, for example, that Cheops was the one who built the Great Pyramid, they're never going to change their mind. They're going to retire and play golf, and that's probably the best thing for them. It's better to leave it in the hands of people who have an education but not that much experience, and hopefully they're inquisitive enough to be able to look at some of this material.
So you think that basically there's not going to be a physical find, but a general consensus from the next generation?
Yeah, I think as the data and other evidence builds up a stronger and stronger case, then eventually the academics will have to start looking at it, because the general public will start asking them questions about why is it that you believe this when we have evidence of that.
Yeah, and that's always something that kind of troubled me, is that, you know, when things are put in front of them, I don't need an explanation. I don't know will suffice. But we tend to not really get, I don't know. You know, is that there's been a lot of discussion about this. Do you think it's a career protecting thing, or just sort of like a dogma protecting thing?
It's both. It's a career protecting thing, a dogma protecting thing, a paradigm protecting thing. Also, of course, you see that most archaeologists, etc., publish their work in journals that only other archaeologists look at. Once in a while, you'll get something, for example, put on in National Geographic or something of that nature. But now that we have the internet, it's possible to broadcast to 7 billion people.
Right. Unfortunately, it's on the internet also, which is, you know, also known for broadcasting a bunch of BS.
There is that.
So do you find that that within the circle that believes that this may be the case, do you find that there's a fair amount of opposition there about what they think the situation is? Because surely people are jumping to conclusions. Do you find that people in the circle are butting heads? Politely.
Oh yeah, heads. Definitely. I mean, you do. Some people think that all so-called alternative researchers are great friends and get along, but people have their own pet theories, and and suppositions. And so what I try to do is back up all of the things that I do with actual data, rather than saying, my theory is this, necessarily. So you get a lot of that. But in the end, reality will rule.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Do you think that I realize we're kind of beating this question to death, but do you think science will ever let us know for sure, or do you think we're just putting together pieces and we'll have assumptions for the rest of time? Because as every year goes by, proof is falling apart. Proof is falling back into dirt. Do you think that we'll ever truly know?
Oh yeah, actually, step by step we're learning, and that's what's wonderful about modern technology. Like a smartphone with the right, you can take that into the field with the right apps. Right now, I'm doing a lot of work at an ancient megalithic site called Pumapunku in Bolivia, and there we're finding magnetic anomalies thanks to apps like magnetometers and even a simple compass. And that's something that the archaeologists have not even looked at. So that adds another layer of complexity. Was the magnetism something that was utilized in the transport of the stone? Was it also utilized in the way that the stone was shaped? So that's, I don't think we have to depend upon academics so much anymore. A PhD is education, but it's basically a piece of paper. When you have people like me that spend much more time out in the field studying this stuff than they do, and I have a lot of different people working with me, then I think that's where the answers are definitely coming.
Well, we're coming up on the end of the show, unfortunately. An hour flies by rather quickly. How can people find out more about you, about your tours, and about your books?
Everything is on my website, hiddenincatours.com, and 90% of the content is free.
Oh, well, that's great. hiddenincatours.com, and I assume you're also on social media?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I've got 930 YouTube videos. I'm on Facebook, and that's more or less it. I don't bother with Twitter so much because I like to send photos and video rather than little text messages.
Right. So Hidden Inca Tours, let me squeeze this in. Is that something that people can sign up for tours? Are you giving tours?
Yeah, my wife and I do about 20% of our time is tours. We're actually at the saturation point. We don't want to do more than that, but we do have scheduled tours to Egypt and Peru and Bolivia and Easter Island. And then also we do private tours for people as well.
Well, that sounds awesome. All right. Thank you very much for being on the show. You've been listening to Brien Foerster here on Radio Wasteland. Thanks for checking us out.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome back to Radio Wasteland.
Yes, that is the show that this is.
And we've been listening to our guest, Brien Foerster, tell us about ancient Incas. This has always been one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, I was very unfamiliar with it, and
really,
it's quite interesting to me.
Well, it's definitely a branch of the ancient alien theory, because there's all this stuff, and people are just all, how is this even possible?
Right. Well, it does. I don't know if I'm swallowing the alien bit, but it sure does sound to me like there's some stuff we don't understand yet, and that maybe our current explanations aren't cutting it.
Yeah, but between the ancient alien and previous human civilizations, as much as I'd like to think that there was alien involvement or that there are aliens, as much as I like that stuff, I prefer that it's ancient humans because
I find that kind of implausible, though.
Do you?
If they have that level of technology, then surely they would have globe-spanning infrastructure, just like we do. what would people see 12,000 years later if we all just vanished off the Earth?
Well, yeah,
People would see a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but that's the nature of how our technology was built. Surely we think it's possible that a species somewhere on some distant water planet is capable of achieving sentience and high technology.
Sure.
But also
and that planet is going to be full of power plants and stuff.
Incapable of creating a combustion engine. Because it would be underwater. So it's like we've taken our things that we've learned and we built on top of them. And so who's to say that back then maybe a science was obvious to them that is not obvious to us, that was very easy to achieve?
Maybe so. But these people would have been human, just like us.
Human, yeah.
So, I don't know. I guess I'm having trouble stretching my imagination that far or something. But I think, on the other hand, aliens...
You don't think aliens would come here?
They might. There's just... I don't know. It's just awfully easy, isn't it? It's
it
like
is.
We don't get this.
Well, it's like the
aliens.
religion argument is an easy thing to fall back on, As is often the case in these follow-up segments, something in the previous segment made me think of a book. And
not a horror movie.
No. It makes me think of 2001 and 2010. So the premise in 2001 is that, the monolith was created by one of the most ancient species in the galaxy because they went out, they achieved technological ability to travel between planets, between solar systems, and they went out in search of other sentient beings like them. And what they found most of the time was that they destroyed themselves. And so this sort of this is like one of those things that sort of ticks me in the direction of, it is totally possible that there was some sort of alien intervention that basically allowed us to make it past certain critical points in our existence.
Yeah. Well, I am a pretty big believer, actually, in this great filter argument. That, there's got to be something that winnows down the number of intelligent civilizations out there. Otherwise the sky would just be full of signals. Probably what it is that they have a tendency to self-destruct or, be wiped out by an unusually nasty solar flare or what have you.
Right. Well... there is a long list of ways that life could be extinguished in a moment.
Yeah.
Without us even knowing.
Yeah. That's very true.
A gamma burst is one that comes to mind that basically
could just scour the planet
in a matter of seconds. And we probably wouldn't even see it coming.
Right. Well, the moment the gamma burst hit us, it is the moment the light would reach us.
Right.
Because it's the same thing.
Right.
So it's like it is literally impossible for us to see that coming.
Right. And it would instantly remove our atmosphere, and we'd have however long you can hold your breath. If you're some sort of crazy Norwegian diver, you might make it for 15 minutes.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it would kick off massive firestorms and such.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. But you got to have oxygen to have fire.
But you know what? A couple of days ago in the news, there was the story that they found... a new room inside the Great Pyramid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and this totally reminded me of that because it's like we've known about the pyramid for a long time, right? We've excavated it, centuries ago. And they just found a new room by using this sort of, muon imaging technique. They look for this, specific type of elementary particles, and they found a space within the pyramid that it looks like a room. They haven't gone in yet. They don't, because it's sealed off, so they don't know
how to get in there.
Well, they don't want to go knocking down walls.
Oh, yeah. Egypt will not let them.
They're trying to, preserve.
This is a big argument in the community, is that Egypt has pretty much stopped any sort of exploration.
Yeah, exactly.
Most exploration has been stopped in there, but definitely anything that's possibly damaging.
Right. So that's why we had to wait until we had this super fancy imaging technique. So it's like the idea that these ancient structures are not fully understood. I'm totally behind that. We just found a new room in the pyramid. So.
Well, what do you think? Are we star children, or are we just a whole lot smarter than we thought we were? You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland, and it's time for the news. Sean, you better have something interesting, or else.
Okay. Well, I do have something interesting.
All right, you're off the hook.
Well, I mean, we'll wait and see. I'm making a pretty big claim here.
All right. How interesting is it?
On a scale of 1 to 10, 7.
That's good.
It's pretty good.
All right, I'll take it.
Okay, so I want to follow up on a story that I talked about a few months ago, the winged creature in Chicago.
Okay.
Those sightings, as I mentioned at the time, have been trickling in all throughout 2017.
This is the one that we were equating to being new Mothman sightings.
Right, and a lot of people are saying that because these sightings are incredibly similar in many ways to the Point Pleasant sightings 50 years ago. But there have now been 45 sightings since February, a couple a month. There was at least one where there was 2 sightings in a single day. So you can look up a timeline of winged humanoid sightings in Chicago online. I recommend you do. It's a really interesting read because, like, okay, all those people are lying. What's going on here? That's
like 5 a month.
Right. That's exactly
more than one a week.
It is.
And so, yeah, I don't know.
See, this is the thing. It's a lot like the Point Pleasant thing because there were a lot of sightings in the period of a year, and then nothing, and then the bridge collapsed and a whole bunch of people died and people swore it was Mothman related. Who knows about that? But the point is, in both of these places, we get a flurry of these sightings with no apparent explanation, but they're seen by a lot of people.
Yeah, so you and I, we work with businesses. We talk to a lot of people. We're just like anybody else. We shop. We're consumers. We deal with a lot of people. I've played in bands and traveled around the country. I've met a lot of people. While I have fallen back on my negative attitude that most people are highly unintelligent,
right?
I don't think that they are liars seeking attention for having seen some crazy red-eyed winged monster.
Yeah.
And to find 45, 5 a month in the same area,
right,
Yeah,
and there have been a few in Chicago over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's one in 2016. There was one in, I think, 2000. There were a couple since then. And that's kind of what you'd expect from just every day. In any given period, there's like that many Loch Ness Monster sightings. And it's pretty easy to discredit that. But a flurry of these. And I want to read the latest sighting, the report of it, because it's just horror story material. It's
awesome. Let's hear it.
All right. We were parked in the parking lot of the community center at Piotrowski Park. Don't know if that's how you say it. I'm not from Chicago. At about 10:30 p.m., we had both gotten off work at 10 p.m. and decided to meet up at the park and spend some time together before going home. We were in my boyfriend's car talking and listening to music when it felt like something hit his car from behind. There was no one else in the parking lot except his car and mine, but it felt like a car had hit him. My boyfriend stopped what he was doing and was going to step out to see what hit his car when something large dropped onto the hood. We looked and both screamed at the same time as we saw a pair of bright orange eyes peering at us through the windshield. The thing that landed was solid black and was about the size of a man and had what looked like wings that were spread out wide. It looked straight at us and then appeared to swipe the windshield with his hand. The fingers were long, much longer than a normal person, and ended in what looked like claws. It looked like it was trying to get into the car and at us. We were both screaming as it swiped the windshield at 3 or 4 times. My boyfriend then grabbed a flashlight that he had in the car and shined it through the windshield at this thing. It then shrieked out loud. It sounded like what the screams of multiple people in a small room would sound like. Then it flexed its wings and took off straight up and was gone from our sight. We heard it shriek out at least twice, about 1 minute apart, as it probably circled the area, after which we heard silence. We were both scared beyond belief, and I was hysterical and crying, afraid to get out, as I thought it might swoop down and attack me if I did.
That is terrifying.
Right?
That makes me think of tons of horror movies.
And a lot of these sightings in the timeline are just like that. You know, I think the last one I talked about was very similar. You know, giant Batman creature scares you out of your mind and then shoots off into the sky.
Yeah, that is terrifying. Okay, so my question here, you might not have an answer for this. It's a little off topic, but I do know you got a thing for Mothman.
Yes, that's true.
Why do they call it Mothman if it looks like a big black bat creature?
I don't know. I think at some point someone thought it kind of looked like an insect.
Maybe its eyes.
Yeah, and its eyes, you know, like big, bright eyes. It's said to not have a very defined head in the original Mothman sightings, so kind of moth-like, I guess. But I've always thought it was a bit of a misnomer, frankly.
And where are these sightings at again?
I guess Batman was taken.
Right. Totally.
They've been all over the Chicago area.
Chicago. All right.
Yes.
Yet another reason to stay away from Chicago. You've been listening to Radio Wasteland. Thanks for checking us out.